Recording. So, all right, I'm recording now. Hello, welcome to FIG, the Free Inquiry Group. We're having a guest tonight speak to us about vaccination persuasion. We'll tell you what that means in a second. But for those who don't know, we are FIG, the Free Inquiry Group. Please go to our website and learn more about us. You can see our intentions and our mission and what we're up to. And on the front page, you'll see who's speaking next, and you can join. We'd love to have you join us, and we'd love to have your money. It's a nice, because we have to pay for all kinds of stuff. So that's all I have to say about FIG. Now I'm going to introduce you to our speaker tonight. I ask you all to mute yourselves to get out any stray noises. Doctor, we didn't discuss Doctor. She'll tell us when she begins whether she wants to be interrupted or not. Wait for questions, but we'll let her speak the way she wants to. And she's going to introduce herself. She's much better equipped at that than I am. So without any further ado, Dr. Louito Edje.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here because really our goal is to try and make sure that we make strides toward ending this pandemic in any way we possibly can. We can't reach everyone, so we arm as many people with as much knowledge and information as we can to help achieve that goal. So just real briefly here, I am a double alumna from the University of Michigan, graduated in 1995, and I have a master's in health professions education, which is how to teach medical professionals. I am an associate dean at University of Cincinnati, and I peer review a couple of journals, and also I'm in charge of the 700 residents and fellows across all specialties who are training at our university. The objectives I really want to address today are, number one, why do we even want to address vaccine persuasion? And I think, of course, ending the pandemic is one, but also having health equity. So we'll talk briefly about that to kind of keep an eye on the goal. Also be familiar with some causes of vaccine hesitancy. And I'm going to actually bring to the fore four analogies that I found very helpful. This is my 90-second 9-2 ND second presentation slash podcast slash interview to do with COVID over the course of the pandemic, specific to vaccine hesitancy, just trying to move the needle. So again, these analogies are things that I've picked up as ways to explain things that are science into bite-sized nuggets that are hopefully persuasive. So if we look at equality, everybody gets exactly the same thing. So the same size crate, but not everyone can see the game. Equity really would be, it doesn't really matter how many crates. We want everyone to see the game. So the outcome is the issue there. And of course, the last one here is inclusive design. Now, what does health equity mean? It really is something that is the assurance that all conditions are optimal for the health of all people. And it requires three main principles, the first of which is valuing all individuals and populations equally, regardless of religious bent, political bent, ethnicity, etc. Recognizing historic injustices, and then providing resources according to need. And lastly, again, health disparities will be eliminated when health equity is achieved. When you look at this in the case of vaccines, equality would be the same size crate. Everyone gets free vaccine, as we were just talking about, at Walgreens, for example. But equity really is everybody becomes vaccinated. Again, we are outcomes oriented. Everyone actually gets vaccinated. The issue here is then you have to deal with the piles of history that litter the pathway to decisions for some people. You have to deal with barriers, for example, access. Can everyone get to a Walgreens in their neighborhood? Things like that. Can they take time off and still be paid? And then everyone gets vaccinated. And I'm going to skip through that one. So vaccine hesitancy, if you look at, this is from the coronavirus study on vaccine. Specific to Black and Latinx, and this was done by the NAACP. We know that Black and Latinx individuals in particular have been disproportionately affected by COVID, and that 55% of Blacks know somebody who's had COVID, and 48 know somebody who has been hospitalized for it, and a higher number in the Latinx Americans on the right. We also know that trust in Black versus white community leaders is twice as likely. So representation does matter. So having someone who looks like you telling you something is an important piece. And that's why today is day number, it's day number 351 currently. Trust also in healthcare providers is pretty high. So having somebody involved in that discussion is very helpful, who's got the background. As far as causes of hesitancy, I just want to bring to the fore, back in 1932, 632 Black men were approached on behalf of the U.S. Public Health Service, so a bona fide government agency, faith leaders, community service, and medical personnel. And they were told that they would be given free medical care and free meals. And actually, physicians in the area were sent a letter with a list of all their names, and they were told, do not treat these individuals. And these gentlemen actually were, they had syphilis. There was no penicillin that was discovered at the time, but 40 years later, we found out that penicillin was discovered partway through the study, and it was withheld from them. So the lack of trust was rooted in some of these types of stories. Again, July 24th, 40 years later, the Washington Star-News published this information. As we look at things today, I think it's extremely important to know, when you're trying to persuade, what is the data around who is having a problem with being persuaded, and then going ahead and answering the question, why, and then having tools to go ahead and address that. So as you see here, Kaiser Family Foundation Vaccine Monitor is an excellent tool to use to find out, what are the attitudes out there around vaccines, what is the data. And as you can see, we actually have a list here of those who've already been vaccinated. The lower crew here would be Republicans and people between age 18 and 49 seem to be in the lower group. If you go ahead then and look at those who say, I'm absolutely definitely not getting vaccinated, you can mandate it, you can do whatever, I'm just not doing it, meaning that they would even quit their job. We have 1 in 5 folks down here, and 1 in 5 down if you look at the 18 to 20. So there's still folks that need to be worked on in that arena to go ahead and have the conversations with them as to why. When you look at Black adults and you look at the lines here from December 2020 through June of 2021, if you look at the blue line, this is the number of people, the one that's ascending, the number of people who are vaccinated. But if you look at the definitely not, what we've found, and this is probably because we've had Delta breakthroughs, but there's a little uptick right here to 16% at the end of the curve, where folks are saying, listen, I'm less inclined to be trusting of this vaccine because we had Delta breakthrough. That is a little different if you look at the Hispanic adults. A lot have been vaccinated, fewer than Black Americans, but if you look down here, again, you've got more of a straight line for the definitely not. And then if you look at white adults, again, the dark blue line at the top, 72% are vaccinated. And if you look at the definitely nots, it's pretty much a straight line across the bottom. So we do know that an increase in COVID vaccine enthusiasm has slowed across ethnic groups. And I think Delta had a significant component of that. People were getting vaccinated when the vaccine had no breakthroughs, and those who really aren't going to get vaccinated have really been staunch about it. Here in the greater Cincinnati area, all of the hospitals have gotten together, and by October 1st at 4 p.m., all of the healthcare workers at University of Cincinnati have to be vaccinated. There is a cadre of probably 110 people who are not going to be working anymore because they choose not to be in that space. So that has an effect. This slide shows for children between age 12 and 17, the higher income parents are more likely to say their child's school provided them COVID-19 vaccine information. So when you talk about persuasion, having information available and having access to that is really important. Again, higher income parents more likely to say their child's school provided COVID-19 vaccine information. And what did they do with that information? What we have found is that in the top 2 bars, that if the school encouraged the vaccine, 62% of them got vaccinated. If the school did not encourage the vaccine, only 30% of them got vaccinated. And again, if the school provided information about the vaccine, 58, and then if the school did not, it's down at 32. So providing information helps. And so when you're trying to persuade, having documentation, following the science is important in moving the bar forward. Here, and I'm going to actually just put a box around the bottom This is an access issue. A lot of folks say, well, hey, listen, there's plenty of vaccine out there. Just roll up to, a pharmacy and they can, drop a shot in my arm. Well, the problem is access. People having an opportunity to get off work and still get paid, or whatever the case would be, have childcare during that time. And as you can see in the middle blue column there, the 49%, this affects Hispanic more than Black, and then Black more than white, for all that portion right down there. So again, Black and Hispanic patients or parents are more likely than white parents to be concerned about access related barriers. So again, the vaccine's available, but being able to get there. And then this speaks to the uptick in folks saying, I don't really know about that vaccine. This is when Delta ended up popping up and breaking through, because it's it's 1,000 times more plentiful in the upper airways as far as being transmitted than the Alpha variant, the B.1.1.7 was back in the beginning of the pandemic. And so again, looking at that, the possibility of a booster has caused them to worry about COVID. Why would we need a booster if these were great vaccines? And we can talk about that in the questions section as well. Barriers can be finding cracks in the system, folks slipping through. Maybe they don't have a physician at all. Maybe they have no internet, no car if you have drive-through sessions, and no time in the workday. Also access, the lady in the very middle here is my grandma, she's 97. And you'd think that because she's 97, she would have been at the very top of the list of folks who've gotten vaccinated back in December. Well, when Moderna EUA was approved, she should have been on the top of the list. She was not. In fact, we tried. My mother, who's at the bottom of the page, has a doctorate, and she was on there daily trying to get her in. She did not get vaccinated till February. And this was an access issue, so it does affect individuals. As far as physician skills that we know about, certainly telling stories helps, and this is why I'm going to bring up analogies. Physicians definitely have credibility. Sticking to the science is absolutely very important. Having access to an understanding of research is something that we can do. We can translate that into digestible nuggets, like I said, and we'll talk about 4 of those instances in a minute. And as far as physicians and the public trust, we're up at number 3 there as far as trusting. And of course, unfortunately, lobbyists in Congress are way at the bottom. Also, knowing your audience is critically important. And I'll just highlight this area right here. Women should be the chief medical officers of the families, if you were to put a term around them, because according to CDC data, 79% of women pick the family's physician, 77 make the medical visit appointments, and 59 make the major health decisions for the family. Also on trust, there is unfortunately a divide between Republicans and Democrats. And if you can see, trust in medical scientists has gone up in the Democrat category of individuals, but it's actually gone down by 1% in Republicans. As far as trust in scientists, specifically, scientists in general, that is actually stayed flat for Republicans and gone up for Democrats. Skills that physicians can develop, of course, again, as I mentioned, defining goal and audience, crafting personal stories, which we'll talk about, sticking to your message and sticking to the science. And science changes. And I think there's been some concern for folks. It's like, wait, you said wear masks, not wear masks, etc. Sticking to the science, and the science does change as new knowledge comes forward. And then developing relationships. And this is part of how, me getting into the Moderna trial, which I am in, as I mentioned, has catalyzed a fair number of relationships that have allowed me to go ahead and be in different places at different times, trying to answer questions and give tools. So the analogies, there are 4 of them that I use. Key in a changing lock, we'll go over each of them separately. Key in a changing lock, icing on the cake, safety deposit box, and Snapchat message. So key in a changing lock. So in this situation, if you think about the lock as the virus and the key as the vaccine, whenever you have a variant, the lock starts to change. And what we want to do is to make sure that our vaccine, our key, fits in the lock at all times. So far, all of our mRNA vaccines have fit. However, the virus has changed. It covers. The issue is, of course, Delta is having a little bit of breakthrough, but in general, we've been good. What we have not had to do is come up with brand spanking new vaccines. And that's something that we are very concerned about with patients. The longer that we have a large pool of people who are not vaccinated, the more that lot can change. And so it is really a race against the variants to get people vaccinated, because we don't want that lot to change to the point where Moderna and Pfizer don't work at all anymore. Currently, they keep people out of the hospital and they're keeping people from dying, but we could get beyond that. Again, so this is a good analogy for somebody who's saying, listen, I'm gonna just wait, I'm on the fence, which I hear a lot. The icing on the cake analogy is for those who say the vaccine was developed way too fast. And to this I say, if you look at each of these cakes right here, this is golden layer cake, maybe a pound cake, and each one represents 10 years. So we have actually been studying coronaviruses for 10 years plus 10 years. So there's 20 years of research on the family of viruses in which the COVID virus is. And so all we had to do when the pandemic happened is we had to go ahead and ice that cake, meaning it took us 66 days to find the genetic sequence for the spike protein, which is on the outside of the virus, to be able to then go ahead and make that, that vaccine, the mRNA vaccine. So again, when people say the vaccine was developed too fast, it was not. What happened was we really had all the pieces together. We just needed a few more pieces to add to that puzzle to make it a complete puzzle. We just had to find the flavor of the icing, ice that cake, everything else was gone. So this has actually been in development really for about 20 years. As far as the safety deposit box, this is for those individuals who say, I'm concerned the vaccine will affect my fertility. And we've noticed that a lot in nurses who are saying, you know, listen, if there's a vaccine mandate, I'm out of here. Well, the issue here is that, you know, they're in the young reproductive ages. What does that mean if I get mRNA, which is, again, the genetic blueprint for the spike protein on the virus? A couple of things to say about that. If you look at a volt, okay, and you look at a human cell, all of the genetic material to make another Lou is locked in a safety deposit box that has zero access. So all of the mRNA cannot get into that safety deposit box within your cell called the nucleus. It's locked down hard. Not only that, this goes to the issue of the Snapchat message, which I'll talk about in just a second. The mRNA only stays in your body for 48 hours. And so in this situation, what has happened is that it's like a flash of light into your system, enough for your body to recognize and understand how to make these antibodies, and then it's gone. And so most of the side effects that are going to happen from mRNA vaccines in particular are going to only last for that 48 hours. There'll be fever, it may be fatigue, it may be headache, it may be muscle aches, it may be body aches. Those are the main 5 things that people have, and they only last for that period of time. The Snapchat message analogy, the vaccine will have harmful effects on my body. This is the one that I use. The vaccine is not in your body long enough to cause any sort of issues as far as long-term side effects. However, unlike COVID has long COVID related potentials. And the big thing that we're seeing right now is that vaccine hesitant group of the 18 to 49, those individuals, especially on the lower end of that, are still in some of the brain development stages of their life. And we're starting to see cognitive deficits, Alzheimer's, dementia type things that are going on in kids who will be in college, who are taking standardized tests like ACTs and SATs and so forth. The other thing I think important is going ahead and talking about catalytic partnerships, talking to community leaders, talking to local groups to try and arm them with information to move forward, faith leaders, local businesses, schools, and primary care. All of these are things that I have done. And again, being in the Moderna trial, the reason I did that is I felt that I would be able to go ahead and have a credible case to move forward. As soon as I got in the trial, this was after the death of one of my family members, that same weekend, I got enrolled in this, and somebody wrote a tiny story, tweeted that out, and then that's where this ended up being a ton of different things down the line, and I ended up being involved with all of these different productions here. Some of them, recorded, others not. Also being involved as an activist, being one of 450 physicians who wrote to our school district to say, listen, we have to have a mask mandate because we touch our face 16 times an hour. And if we have a 1,000-fold increase in the number of virus particles that are in your upper airways with Delta versus Alpha, we want to make sure that kids are masked and we're protecting the kids that are younger than 12 who have not yet been vaccinated. And then just my last slide, just saying thank you for allowing me to be here, but that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I think this is a life-saving thing to convince somebody to go ahead and use a life-saving and free vaccine. So I'm going to stop sharing my slide and go ahead and answer any questions that you might have.
Go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead.
Hi, Lou. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a ton of questions, but I'll try to just parse them out. One of the things you touched on, one reason why medical healthcare professionals are showing, why so many of them seem to be showing resistance to getting vaccinated, but it seems counterintuitive. What's really going on other than the fertility question?
As far as the nurses?
Yeah, and other healthcare workers.
Yeah, so I will just say this, let me qualify the healthcare workers. We are a homogeneous group of folks. If you just look specifically at physicians, Republican, Muslim, Black, white, young, old, 96% of us physicians have been vaccinated. There's not a single thing I know in medicine where we all agree on something like that. This is like, it's been quite amazing because we're such a diverse group. We have found again that nurses and folks in who take care of folks in nursing homes have been, of the subset of healthcare providers, the ones that have been most resistant. And we're really not sure why that is. That has not come to the fore just yet.
Did it have to do with ethnicity? Like, if you were talking about African Americans, and their bad experiences with the healthcare system.
Yeah. And Winnie, you bring up a very good point, and I will state that it's possible. So the majority of physicians are not African American. So there's when I say 96%, you're absolutely right. We are a minority of that subset. It's very possible. It's very possible that that is the case.
I got that. What was I hearing about Alzheimer's and mental decline? Go ahead.
Absolutely. If you think, just pick an organ system and COVID can affect it. And what we have seen
COVID. Okay. I thought you did vaccination. Okay.
Not the vaccine.
Not the vaccine.
Not the vaccine. I'm talking about
misunderstood.
About Absolutely. I appreciate you clarifying that. The biggest issue, again, long COVID is a problem. And the 700 physicians in training that I work with, I'm always very concerned about them. They're vaccinated. They were the largest group of vaccinated people first in line when everything started with the pandemic. When we had to sort of parse out who gets it first, we only had 975 doses. And we had 9,000 people who work at the University of Cincinnati. And we were the only hospital in the area who got the vaccine. So that, my cohort of learners were the first ones who got the vaccines here in town. But again, they're in their formative years as well. And so making sure that they stay sharp and they're able to do their jobs was so important for us.
Yeah.
Peter, did you see a question in the chat?
Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, and I can remind, if you feel you're not getting your question, here, you can go to the chat and add your question. Susan has a question in the chat. I'm in the middle of a clinical experience at a busy pediatric practice, and it seems like I'm noticing a pattern of COVID vaccine hesitancy starting to spill over into increased hesitancy for standard school child vaccines. I'm sorry. Is there any available evidence suggesting this is starting to take place? And Nate has a question after that.
Right. So I think the question is this starting to affect non-COVID related vaccines? Is that the question? Yeah, I think so. There was a bill that was put forward, stating, vaccines We should be mandating COVID vaccines. And in fact, while we're at it, let's not mandate any vaccines at all. I will just say I am concerned about that when that came forward, because you know, I did one of my rotations when I was in training in Africa, and you get to see what happens when somebody dies of measles. They go blind, usually first, and it's a horrific thing. And I think people have not, fortunately, not seen some of the sequelae of unvaccinated children. It's really a tragedy when that happens. The sclera, the white of your eye, takes over the colored portion of your eye when you die of measles and you go blind from measles. That's something that we don't see here, thank goodness. But those are some of the sequelae of us not paying attention to what we should be doing for kids. You are on mute, Peter.
Thank you. Could you, my kids are downstairs screaming. So if you, my grandkids, but if you, let me know if you hear them, and I'll be, if you don't hear them, I'll be less muting myself.
Don't hear them at all.
Don't hear them at all. Okay. Could you explain more about the mRNA vaccines leaving the body in 48 hours?
Absolutely. So mRNA is a blueprint for that spike protein. And it's so unstable that it's actually wrapped in fat, this thing called a lipid nanoparticle, so that it can actually safely be injected into a cell and stay in its normal form. So the three main ingredients, which actually addresses one of the things that people do ask, is like, oh my goodness, there's so many other things in these vaccines. The answer is there's really mRNA, the lipid nanoparticle that coats it to stabilize it, and a little bit of sugar. And you inject that into your system, and the mRNA, now the lipid nanoparticle is gone, and so it dissipates, and it's resolved. So that again is why your symptoms usually are going to only last for about 48 hours. If they last longer than that, there could be something else that's going on, including you haven't become immune yet, and you may have actually gotten COVID in this immune that you would have already gotten before, right? Because you haven't had the full immunity yet. So
where do you fit the microchip? How do you get that in there?
Yeah, really, this right here, this is the microchip that's following us all around. It's not in the vaccine.
Thank you very much for clearing that one up. So yeah, I think the spike, it doesn't have the fat around it. The vaccine has the fat around it.
Yes, the mRNA for the vaccine. And then the reason that it was manufactured that way, again, is so that it was stable enough to go intramuscularly into the muscle and to be injected into the muscle. It's a logistical mechanical piece. It has to be there wrapped to be able to get to where it needs to do its job.
Okay, Scott wanted to hear Nate's question. So, and it looks like I'll let you, Bill, it's in the text here, but you can ask it live.
I just wanted to point out Ginny's had her hand up, and I think you missed it, but she had a question.
Oh, well, I just wondered if, what you were talking about before, if that's why they have to use the vaccine up so quickly, that it expires. Is that same kind of instability?
Zero, and yes, there's no preservative in it, at least, and we're talking about Pfizer and both. They have to be kept at, temperatures. They're trying to go ahead and modify it to the point where it can stay. Moderna can stay at room temperature for 28 days. Yes. Well, when I say in the situation of being in a doctor's office, for example, we're able to do that. Pfizer had to be, kept at such much lower temperatures. And this is why actually when J&J came out, number one is one shot, it didn't have all of these specifications. We were very concerned that, this would probably be something useful for overseas, getting to remote areas and rural places that didn't have the capacity.
And Johnson & Johnson is an old school inoculation, right?
Yeah, so Johnson & Johnson uses what we call add-back technology, which basically means that they actually take the cold virus and they inactivate it so it can't reproduce itself. And then they splice in the same genetic components that, the synthetic spike protein. And then that's how that happens. So there is virus, not COVID virus, but there is virus in J&J.
I thought the cold virus was a kind of a COVID virus. No,
it is.
No,
isn't it? No.
No, so it's an adenovirus. The one that's why it's called advax technology, ad for adenovirus and vaccine for the advax. But that is the technology that's used for J&J.
And maybe it's the flu. Is it the flu I'm thinking of?
Yes.
So
Okay.
COVID's a flu. Is COVID a flu or a cold? It's a flu. Or it's its own thing.
COVID is a coronavirus.
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus, yes.
And that's a
And-
separate thing.
From adenovirus, yes.
Adenovirus. Okay, we're learning a lot about viruses, and you've given us some help about convincing people, but we have emotional attachment to these beliefs, and maybe that's somebody else's job to try to how we do that. I also read an article about a doctor. She's kind of osteopath, got her doctorate. Do you know about her? And she's selling a book. Oh,
I don't. I just have trained DOs in my residency programs.
She has a boot camp for avoiding vaccines, and she has a book for like over $500 on Amazon, why you should not get vaccinated. That's an awful thing to try to fight, I guess. And this thing is so stupid. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
She's making plenty of.
Yeah, she's making plenty of money off.
She's making a lot of money.
Yeah, that is unconscionable.
Right.
Yeah.
There are 300, just to interject, just real briefly, there are 30,000 of us in the Moderna trial, and there are 44,000 in the Pfizer, above age 18, not even including the 12, to 17-year-old kids. And none of us have died, and none of us have been hospitalized.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as death goes from the vaccine, that is a huge pool of people that, certainly she can.
I remember her claim now is that it magnetizes you somehow, and it makes contact with 5G. And somehow, what people will believe. I mean, people will. They'll go out and they'll buy horse dewormer when they can get the real thing for free. I mean, this is an incredible problem, and all of us need to talk to people. But at what point, when they stop listening to reason, I guess we give up, right? There's nothing we can do.
Peter, there are 5 questions in the queue already. So
okay, sorry. And okay, Michelle, how safe is it for a vaccinated person to be hospitalized? Are COVID patients sequestered? And what about unvaccinated healthcare workers?
Okay, so great question. Yes, we do have COVID cohorted units. That's what we call them. And we keep COVID patients separate. There are very strict precautions on what we have to wear to get into the space. When there are spaces where we don't know whether the patient has COVID or not, we are fully clothed in PPE. So for example, a high risk area where there are patients where we don't know whether you have COVID or not would be an ER, for example. So the physicians are, again, you cohort, and if you have a suspicion, which they're called PUIs, so person of under investigation for COVID, if we have a high suspicion, they're in a specific location versus not. And we have to protect as if everyone has COVID in those spaces. If you've been tested and negative, that's different. As far as healthcare workers being vaccinated, October 1st at 4 p.m., everyone at UC Health who is a healthcare worker has to be vaccinated, or you essentially are in violation of the code. And they're very concerned about that because you don't want to be a sick person coming to the hospital and get COVID from your healthcare workers. That would be a tragedy. I mean, especially if you've masked and protected yourself and done what Scott did, coughed into your elbow very wonderfully. Done all the things you should be doing.
Protected us. Thank you.
Yes. If you've done all the things you should be doing, and then you come in and you're at your worst and your healthcare provider gives you COVID because they're not vaccinated, that's a tragedy in itself.
Okay.
They have to be fully vaccinated by that 4 p.m.
Yes.
Or
Yep. We had a long runway to tell everybody that they have to get vaccinated. Now, the issue about so I was in this study. I think Michelle had something that popped up in the chat as well. I'm in the study again. So here's something that's important about trust and things that have changed since the since the study that was Tuskegee, they should have told everyone that penicillin is now available, we'll give it to you, it works, and stop the study. What they did with us, I'm still in the study, I'm in for the full 25 months because I want to know what my antibody levels are at the end of 25 months. What we do know is that on January 6th, since now we had full benefit from, this actually works, this vaccine works, I was blinded. I, at that point, did not know, did I have COVID or did I get saline? I can tell you after the second shot, I knew I didn't get saline because I was like, there's no way plain saline's going to give me this achy arm. So I was vaccinated September 12th and October 14th of a year ago now. And on the 6th of January, they had to unblind me and tell me, yes, you did get it. Would you like to stay in the study? If you didn't get it, here's a vaccine that has been FDA approved and works, and we are obligated by ethics to give you this option.
Okay, yeah, I had a baby. My daughter was preemie, and she was in a test, and I was happy to find out she didn't get it because she survived on her own. It felt good because what are the Okay,
Yeah.
Scott has a question, and I think I'll let him speak it. Okay. Scott, your question was about what's the most compelling 30-second elevator pitch?
Oh, yeah. I was trying to remember what my question was. Sometimes you don't have much time with someone. And so I was just wondering what you felt was if you just have 30 seconds, that 30-second elevator pitch, what should we say to someone to at least get them to consider getting vaccinated?
You know what? I'm going to go on the premise that it takes more than 30 seconds. I'm going to head out. And I'll say this, you have to understand where the person came from. There's not one size fits all as far as the situation. And it often is not just a single conversation. And this is, I would want it to be that way, by golly. We have office visits that are short. We bump into people all the time. But I found that, it will be pushing somebody just over the edge in that situation. They've already got a ton of information already from friends, from family, from things they've read. They've come to this 30 seconds with a runway littered with historic truths or myths or things they've already read. And you need to be able to understand where they are. It's something I don't think that can be done in 30 seconds. I'll just push back on that piece.
Well,
Yeah.
if you get 15 seconds, tell them to watch this video.
That's right.
Yeah. God, I like to tell people it's a global pandemic and we haven't had one in 100 years, and it's all hands on deck, and we're all responsible. Not only, it's not just a choice about ourselves, but it's about our family, it's about our friends, it's about everyone we come in contact with, and we need we need everybody to be a player in it.
Bill, I actually, to my more conservative and Republican friends who tend to be more doubters, I'll say it is our patriotic duty to get
that's a great point.
That's a good one.
The only way we as a country are going to defeat this is if we reach a herd immunity level. And if that means taking on a little personal risk, that's what you do as a patriot.
Yeah.
You can even use the
man up.
You can even use the World War II analogy,
Right.
Yeah.
Actually I have, Bill. We think the same way.
I think that's excellent, Scott. I think that's a great point. I mean, trusting the science, I think is incredibly important as well. And, my argument, the most recent one, it waxes and wanes, but 96% of doctors getting vaccinated, there's not a single other thing. I graduated in 1995 from med school. Not a single thing about a drug, about an idea, about a treatment has, it has just never been that compelling to that many physicians. We know it works, and and that's compelling for me.
Randy
I've often wondered if the 4% it was medically contraindicated.
Yes, and I suspect that's exactly the case. They didn't drill that down, but the study that we have is 96%. Very compelling.
Randy and Brett raised. Oh, look at that hand raise. Yes, they raised their hand. You can do that too if you can find the reactions button, and put you in line for a question if you don't have it in chat. Randy.
Yeah, thank you for coming and talking to us this evening
Absolutely.
about this. I find it very interesting. Just a couple of things. One, I guess is a question. Our state legislature is definitely not working with us on this, and they are quite a barrier. Could there be something like a consortium of the local health providers, the hospital chains or whatever, that really put together a strong public service, a series of public service messages that could blanket the airwaves and maybe take that local approach and bypass some of that political resistance?
Yeah, so there's actually something called the Health Collaborative here in Cincinnati that actually is the group that got together all of the health systems and said, we're going to do a vaccine mandate. And really, this is the only way we can actually state, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you are no longer able to work in our institution.
Mhm.
That takes a lot of leverage to have that sort of thing happen across a city this large. And so, so the Health Collaborative is doing that. We've also got Close the Health Gap that's been working with them as well. So I think the Health Collaborative is probably the biggest organization that's actually been sort of spearheading some of this. I don't know that they've codified the message in such a way that it's actually targeted directly to the legislature, but I think, yeah, that's definitely an idea to push further.
Okay, and thank you. And then a concern that I have, I was listening to a report. This was actually from a German broadcaster, that there's concern about this push for general boosters, and I understand the medical necessity of that, but the push for everyone getting boosters right now is going to make it more difficult for those parts of the world that still are trying to get their first and second doses, and that the pharmaceutical manufacturers are going to prefer to sell us boosters because they're getting a better price than, and so that's kind of my ethical dilemma.
Yeah, I know. It's a really great question. And it is a dilemma. It is a morality dilemma, I think, as well. And so, but the question is, if you don't get your shot, you know, is that shot saved and sent overseas? It's not. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, if we can focus on making sure that we keep our kids safe, because I think, you know, if we find there is a waning of your immunity, for sure. I get 8 vials of blood to prove that every several months. There's a tiny bit of waning. But if we're able to go ahead and get an additional dose and protect the folks here who are not, save their lives, for example, I think there is some benefit to doing that. Now, my other concern is there are other barriers. For example, we talked about refrigeration, you know, at these low temperatures and things like that, that are barriers that I think are the more significant that need to be addressed, you know, as far as moving overseas. It definitely should be a conversation with the CEOs of Moderna and Pfizer, absolutely. I know they've had discussions with that and with President Biden as to what do you do in that space. Certainly, tons of vaccines are going over that way, and vaccines that we haven't needed here because we've had hesitant people and we don't want them to run out, they are being shipped overseas as well.
Okay.
So that, you know, it's not going to be a black and white situation. There's definitely a gray zone here on this issue. I agree with you, Randy.
Okay,
And Brett.
thank you.
Yeah, Randy. If we,
Peter,
Go
I'll
ahead.
just mention, Scott had an earlier question that didn't get addressed either, which was to talk about the differences between RNA and DNA, and to
Okay.
help people understand that stuff.
Yeah. So DNA encodes your, you know, your genetic makeup. So if I were to cut my hand, you know, each cell has got all the information it needs in it to actually fill in that space, exactly the same tissue, the same color, the same everything as it was. mRNA is messenger mRNA, so it's actually sending messages, and it helps to fill in gaps. It's a little bit different than the DNA itself. It doesn't encode anything that reproduces another human being or a portion of another human being. So that's the biggest difference. The M is for messenger, and they're both proteins. They both have you know, subsegments that are you know, that are proteins in there. So they break down similarly, but definitely DNA is very resistant to break down, primarily because it's safe in the nucleus.
I have a moral question, which I was going to save because we're really working on persuasion, but it can maybe be an impetus to persuade. It's ethical. I mean, if there's one, I'm the administrator, I'm the door at this hospital, and I have one bed left, and there's a person who says, I have incredible chest pain. And there's another person who says, I have COVID. And I ask that person, are you vaccinated? So I've got one bed left. I've got an unvaccinated person, and I've got somebody suffering from chest pain. I mean, if you can keep it in that theoretical lock there, I mean, maybe you always take chest pain before you take colds, but you know, with limited resources and hospitals turning people away, can we discriminate against non-vaccinators? And if they knew that, would it help?
So definitely crisis standards of care are going on across the country. The South, Alaska is probably the highest state right now for crisis standards of care, and the South, Louisiana in particular. But here in Cincinnati, we do have a committee, a statewide committee of folks who are physicians who regularly sit down and say, okay, we have Ecmo. So Ecmo is basically like dialysis for your lungs. Okay, with dialysis, your blood is cleaned outside your body and returned to your body via tubing. With Ecmo, your blood is oxygenated outside your body and then returned just like you were breathing. So it's like lungs outside your body. We have 9 Ecmo machines at our hospital. And with severe COVID, we have more than 9 people with Ecmo needs. And so there are things that are done here to prioritize. And it's unfortunate. It happens also with transplants, even before COVID, right? If you were a smoker, you're not necessarily going to be getting on the list. You may be as deserving, but if you were a smoker, that either takes you off the list or puts you at the bottom of the list, unfortunately, because of some of the situations. So there's a very thoughtful process that goes into play. This is very deliberately done, but there are not enough resources in a lot of different places to have everyone get the same access. And it's very disheartening too, because you find out that there are multiple folks who are on their deathbed saying, I wish I'd gotten the vaccine. This is a preventable illness. COVID is a preventable illness. There's nothing else to say about that. It's preventable. There's something that prevents you from getting hospitalized and from dying, and it's free. And it just takes 2 6-second interactions with a healthcare provider to do it. And yet it's too late at that time, because once you have COVID, having the vaccine is not something we can do for you.
So if you have one Ecmo machine and 2 people with COVID, one is vaccinated, well, of course he won't be needing it, will he? Or not?
Unfortunately, but every single thing is taken into account.
Okay,
Every single situation is addressed on an individual basis. All of this is done. I think it's hard too, because a lot of these major decisions are being made, and family may not be there, of course, because COVID, you have isolation, which is extremely difficult as well.
So another example is monoclonal antibodies and whether, who should be prioritized there, vaccinated or unvaccinated, and there's a shortage. And people who need monoclonal antibodies for other conditions sometimes can't get them, as I've read, that there's shortages.
Yeah, I think
is that an issue in Cincinnati?
It's not right now, but certainly it's something that can happen, because with Delta, we've seen it in the past 48 hours or so, sort of a leveling off of Delta. But in Peru, we've got Lambda that's surging, right? So we have yet another Greek alphabet that is potentially coming down the line. And right now, going from B117, which was the Alpha variant, to the Indian variant, the B1617.2, which is Delta, there's a huge increase in how that affected us. Hopefully Lambda is not going to be worse than Delta.
Wow.
And there's a South American one that's just emerged too, isn't there?
That's
Yeah, so Peru.
Peru.
Oh, that's the Peru you meant.
That's
Okay.
Yeah.
Lambda, yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle,
Sorry.
did your question get answered? I thought it was. That's why I didn't ask it. If you're in the trial, how do you know if you've received it or not?
Yeah, we have to be unblinded. I picked a date. It was the day, that the Capitol was stormed. I remember that very clearly. I came out of my visit being delighted that I got Moderna, and my husband's like, look, so.
Michelle asked again, I have encountered people who refuse to be vaccinated because they view the risk of getting COVID as low and the risk of harm from vaccine is higher. Well, we know that's just wrong, but what do you say, Doc?
Yeah, so the risk of COVID, unfortunately, is playing Russian roulette, whether you get COVID or whether you don't, and whether the COVID that you get is something that's a mild thing or you are completely decimated with 13 organ system affected. There was one gentleman who was on NPR, a very compelling story. He had always said to his friends who were older than him, go ahead, I'm a proponent of the vaccine, go ahead and do it. But he was a bodybuilder and healthy and ate right, steamed vegetables and steamed fish, et cetera. I'm good to go. My body's good to go. And he got COVID, and within 8 days, he was learning how to walk again because he was completely decimated. I mean, his muscles wasted. COVID is not a joke, and it really is Russian roulette. Some patients will just get a very mild case, and others, are on the brink of death and die. I've had 4 family members who've died of COVID. This was before the Moderna EUA. This was before the Moderna EUA. And I would have gladly gone ahead and stood in line with them to get their COVID vaccine. There's no going back. This is an irreversible process. Death is an irreversible process. And I'm not sure that people really understand that. You never know whether this is going to be a mild case or this is going to be it.
I'm going to go hug my son. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll just step in here for a second. Something I like to explain to people was if people didn't get vaccinated, if enough people didn't get vaccinated, we'd still be dealing with smallpox. We'd still be dealing with polio. We'd still have diphtheria, rubella, measles, all kinds of,
Absolutely.
I'll ask you another question, which is, have people developed allergies to any of the vaccines?
We haven't actually had any issues with that. Of course, as far as allergies go, anyone who has had an allergy to an injectable vaccine at all in the past, we really recommend you talk to your doctor before you get vaccinated with a COVID vaccine. So an injectable, a true allergy, not an injection site soreness. Your lips are swollen, you've had difficulty breathing, your airways start to clam up, you've broken out in hives, difficult, all of that stuff. That is going to be a true allergy. And again, to an injectable other medication. This is not itchy eyes, watery nose, or sore arm.
Yeah, I've been hospitalized with allergies to medications, and they can take you to the brink of death, actually.
Yes, absolutely can.
Let's see. You talked about the spike protein approach, which is the one that Pfizer and Moderna are using, and
Yes.
then Johnson & Johnson is a more traditional approach. Are there other approaches that are being worked on, and do we know for sure that the one that everybody's latched onto is the best one?
So a couple of things. One, there are several other medications that are vaccines that are out there being used overseas. AstraZeneca has several of those. Most of them are doing advac technology like the J&J. We do know that the mRNA vaccine technology actually is being rolled out into so many other areas because it's been so successful. So just re-looking at how we do vaccines that already exist, like flu vaccine that really does not have, even some of the protections that, our mRNA vaccines currently have. So most of the other ones that are outside though are advac technology, which is the splicing in of the, that's genetic genome from the spike and then putting that into the co-virus.
Is it fair to say that the mRNA technology is kind of revolutionizing?
Absolutely. It was brilliant. Before I got into the company, I was like let me read on this. I read like the Dickens. I studied like it was a board exam to figure this out, because I just got married. I wasn't going to make my husband, anyway, the point of the matter was, we just wanted to make sure I wasn't getting into any sort of trouble. And also to be able to, it just worked, just going through, I'm like, this could work. And I got in September. It wasn't until December that we knew that there would be a vaccine that works. I mean, it was all a gamble. It was really a gamble, but a gamble on good science. The science made sense, and there were no downsides. I couldn't see a downside. So,
yeah, and we'll be applying this technology in a lot of other places, won't we?
We already are. There are a lot of studies underway, and I think just revisiting some of the stuff that we're already using and repurposing that with mRNA technology. Kizzmekia Corbett, who is one of the 2 lead scientists who discovered this, is a 34-year-old Black woman who is a PhD, and her story is really quite amazing. She was, when she was 15, somebody carved out a little space in his lab in North Carolina and had her as, as one of his students, and she just got interested in it, and it just took off from there. And that actually has been a very helpful tool in talking to my vaccine hesitant Black and brown patients, because, it's representation.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay.
Peter, you're back in charge again.
Oh, in charge of what? I'm just I just butt in more than anybody else. So they think I'm in charge, but I have no power over anything. It's good to see go ahead. It's good to see my son. When this is over, we're gonna have plenty of time together. So I just thank you for letting me run. Any other questions?
How about Lou? Are there more things you'd like to, having talked to a lot of us and seen that a number of us are pretty well versed in all of this and pretty knowledgeable. We're a group of people that appreciate science and as opposed to superstition. So
Absolutely. And I say stick with the science. And, wherever that science takes us, let's stick with the science. And I want to, as I mentioned, this is, my 92nd event, and it was not intentional. I moved to Cincinnati, 3 months before the pandemic. Just got married, new practice, knew everything. And certainly wasn't looking to be, doing this. But if we can move toward normal, if we can save a life with a conversation, then, the energy comes from that. And I just encourage you to continue to utilize, the things that you learn along the way to continue saving lives. I'm so happy that you're here listening, and for all the work you're doing, because literally, I don't think people understand you are saving lives. This is a life and death situation. And you're saving lives. This is a noble thing to do, and we don't realize it. We probably don't see it as much as the folks like us who are in the hospital, and we see the devastation that can happen when the conversations don't.
Okay, thank you. This will be on, if you want to send people to it, it'll be on our website. And what else will we do? That's it. Anything else, Bill, or anybody else?
No, I think this was excellent, and I thank you for giving us a lot more than 90 seconds of your time.
Thank you.
Presentation. Thank you.
You are most welcome.
This
Thank
is
you.
awesome. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And I'm serious. I'm going to really continue to promote this all I can, because more people than we're here tonight need to hear this and want to hear it. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michelle?
I don't know if you saw my comment, but I thank you so much for being brave. I know I went through a lot of, I guess, soul searching before I was vaccinated, and it was scary. And you did it at a time when we didn't know as much. You didn't even know if you were getting the vaccine. And so we owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Don't let me
Do you mind
close.
if I take a selfie?
Oh, yeah. Everybody open up your videos, everybody, so she can take a selfie with all of us.
I'll do a screen. I'll do a screenshot too.
Elaine, Dan, Winnie, Barbara, open up your videos.
Oh, that's a good idea. You know what I'm going to do? screen. I'm going to do a screenshot of this thing too.
Yeah. Elaine.
You can send it to me. I have 92 screenshots. I've been keeping a little Rolodex.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Kind of like Elizabeth Warren.
Okay. So that nobody doesn't look dopey or anything. On 3, smile. Let's all smile. I gotcha. I think I got a good one. I'll put it in our, I send out a report, Lou, and on this, and I'll send it to you. If
Thank
you want,
you.
I'll ask you if you want to be on our mailing list for our upcoming
Absolutely.
speakers. Yeah. Okay, good. I'll put you on.
Peter,
Yes.
you might have gotten Lou taking off her glasses. You might want to try one more time.
No, I did it before that. I did it before that.
I got some screenshots too. that
Okay, good. If I got a
I'll
bad
send
one,
you.
we'll get Scott's. You're all
Thank you.
looking good, folks. Don't let me run off because my son is here. If you want to keep going, let me know, but I'm going to
Did you
end. it.
guys see what
You
somebody
go, buddy.
posted?
What's that?
What's that, Scott?
Yeah.
Did you all
I
see
said-
what someone posted on the
What?
meetup page?
No.
What?
What does it say?
Let's see. I'll have to go back to it. The
I can-
meetup brought to you by Big Pharma, creators of diseases and drugs to make more of them. Better questions to ask are, why is there so much resistance to this agenda if noble? Is trying to violate the free will of others and not respecting their choice a positive method? Can there really be one path for everyone? Blah, 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 blah. Perhaps more thorough and thoughtful inquiry will help you see that you cannot be responsible for everyone else's lives and decisions, just as they cannot be responsible for yours.
Is there a name attached?
Yeah, and a link to his blog, and I clicked through the blog, and it's kind of an extremist conspiracy theorist type of blog. But I think one of the challenges that we face is that authoritative, super well-informed people like Lou have to compete for attention from uninformed conspiracy theorists like this gentleman. And, the person in the middle doesn't know who they should listen to. And that's hard to combat. We say trust the science and the scientists and the physicians, but then there's other people that are saying, no, they have an agenda. They're out to get us. And, I don't know what you do about that. That's the distrust of society we have these days, unfortunately.
Some of us
And
really.
what I say is I hope they don't get COVID. I mean,
Yes.
truly, as a physician, I hope they don't get COVID. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But it is difficult because that is a loud voice, and it is a strong voice. And that is why we do these conversations and continue to come out.
There are some people who hope that they actually will get COVID. And that
I
they're
know.
culling the herd,
Yeah, but that's not right. Lou, you grew up in Michigan. I'm hearing a little Canadian kind of accent. No?
One more try, one more guess.
Wisconsin, Minnesota.
No, one more. Last
Upstate
guess.
New York.
No. So I was born in Iowa. I left there when I was 11 months old. And then I went to South Central Africa and I lived there. I went to British boarding school for 14 years. And then came back here. I was in South America for a year in Colombia. Came back here, and when I was 16, went to Michigan State, and I had a British accent, really strong British accent. And so that's the trailing, I think, accent.
Michigan will get you naught,
and boot and trunk and schedule.
Schedule. British will get you schedule, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, folks.
You have something of what would be called a mid-Atlantic accent or something. Where in South Central Africa? Because I was going to guess Tanzania for some reason, but I don't even know.
I lived in Arusha for a bit, very good. But I lived the majority of the time in Malawi, which was a British colony until 1960. And then in South America, I lived in Colombia.
I've been to Arusha, but only for a few days. Well, to climb Kilimanjaro, yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
You climbed Kilimanjaro?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't make it to the top, I'm afraid to say, but I made it over 15,000 feet. And it was,
the only place I saw snow the first time in my life while I was still in Africa was Kilimanjaro. Outside my, kitchen window, we could see Kilimanjaro in the distance. So.
wow, fabulous.
I just read Into Thin Air by Krakauer.
Let's turn Lou loose to the rest of her life.
Okay, thanks, Bill. That's right.
Thank you so much, folks.
Adios.
Stay healthy.
Adios. Well, thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lou.
Bye.